Jump right into the McKenna conversation then?
If that's okay with you folks?
Yep.
I'll frame it up. This is Chris Khorey. You probably remember him from the RFP process.
Everybody.
So Chris is going to bring us up to speed on a draft scope of services that we asked him to put together, and we also emailed out a draft contract today. So Chris is proposing to essentially complete our 2040 master plan. So we were working on some things on the whiteboard, and we put some general goals down, but Chris is going to fill in the specifics of his scope. Feel free to ask questions, and from a staff standpoint, I think we're ready to roll with McKenna. The other issue is another issue for another day. But so there's Mr. Khorey.
Thank you.
Chris, as you jump into this, would you mind, we have some new commissioners up here
Sure.
that may or may not have been a part of that original process. Maybe the elevator pitch, your background, I think there's a good story behind there. So I think that would be relevant to share with the group, and a little bit on the McKenna piece. So.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first, good evening, everyone, and we are absolutely honored to be back. We were disappointed when we were not initially chosen, and we're really happy that you guys have asked us to come back. As far as who is McKenna and who am I? McKenna is, I believe we still are the largest planning firm that is Michigan-based. We are based in the Metro Detroit area in Northville. We have offices in Northville, downtown Detroit, Kalamazoo, and as of last September, Grand Rapids. I am our West Michigan manager. I grew up in the area. I could tell my story about demolishing a mailbox on Butterworth in a snowstorm, but I won't.
Statute of limitations, Chris, you're good.
Yes, as a teenager. Anyway, I moved back from Detroit this past fall to open the Grand Rapids office. So we're only 15 minutes away. We are hiring a second person out of Grand Rapids who, if you do bring us in, you'll see as well as me. You'd also see, if you choose for this project, professionals from Prine and Newhoff, who are our partner here to help us out with infrastructure and other engineering aspects of the project. And they, of course, also are local over on the east side of town with their Grand Rapids office. Anything else you want to know about me, or should I get into the process here?
Commissioners, anything? We're
Okay.
good.
Well, so that's me. That's McKenna, and I can provide information, resumes, firm background, all the stuff we put in our proposal the first time. But this time, we want to really focus on process, because I know that when you've been in a process and it hasn't really gone the way you want, what you want to do is hit the ground running, move forward, and have a light at the end of the tunnel and know what you're doing has value, right? So that's what we tried to do in putting together this scope. The philosophy of the scope that we're putting in front of you is to base a plan in what we're proposing to be called, quote unquote, neighborhood clusters. And what we're proposing that to be is groups of 2 to 4 of the sub-planning areas that staff has worked so hard to create. And what we take is those sub-plans and the work that's already happened and input from the Planning Commission and the public, and create sort of an umbrella document over the top of those sub-plans. And once we put together our neighborhood clusters, and we're envisioning 4 to 6, so I think we're probably coming out closer to the lower end of that, citywide, put them all together, make sure the puzzle pieces fit together, and that's your citywide plan. When you have a city as large and diverse as Walker, we think you kind of have to build it in puzzle pieces. That's the way staff's been approaching things, so that's what we're proposing. But before we get to that, really, we have to start the project up and hit the ground running, right? So we're going to do a review of the deliverables you've already received. We're going to figure out what we can work with and what we can integrate into our process here, and put things into formats where we can use them and all that. We'll also kick off with staff. We'll finalize boundaries of the neighborhood clusters. We'll familiarize ourselves with the boundaries of the existing sub-plans. We'll go through a table of contents for the document so that you guys know what it's going to look like when it's all done, and make sure that it's usable for you guys. We'll also have our graphic design staff take a look at a project logo and logos for each of the neighborhood clusters, so they can be sort of branded, so you can get that out to the public And that would all be sort of hosted off a website where we will advertise engagement opportunities and also put out drafts of the plan, maps, things for people to react to. That's kind of how we envision using the website. Once everything's all sort of set up, and we envision that taking about a month, we're going to get into what we're proposing to be a kind of 2-month iterative overlapping process with the different neighborhood clusters. It's about 8 weeks long, and then a second process will start in the middle of the first one, so that we're not doing 2 months and running this deep into 2020 or something like that. We're going to start off with an existing conditions meeting, field review with staff. We'll go out into the neighborhood, develop a deep understanding of the places where I haven't crashed my car before, or anything like that. We'll create existing land use maps. We'll do demographic understanding at the neighborhood level, and we'll really develop the deep understanding. Then we'll have a planning commission meeting, which will double as a community engagement session. We kind of talked to Frank about that, where maybe we'll do an hour before the planning commission meeting where it's public, and then the planning commission will have their say, and it'll be kind of seamless. And that'll give us the neighborhood's thoughts. Then we'll spend about 3-4 weeks putting together a draft plan. We'll do some goals and objectives for that particular neighborhood cluster. We'll look at community character and land use, and how I'd like to organize that discussion is what are places that we'd like to keep as they are, preserve, and what are places where we think there's change on the horizon. We'll kind of divide that, and then we'll say, okay, well, these are our sort of categories of places that are the same, categories of places that are going to change, and that'll create a future land use map. We'll also look into infrastructure. We'll look into mobility, roads, transit, biking, walking. We'll look into, not in the depth of a Parks and Rec plan, but we'll look into where are we short on Parks and Recreation facilities and where we should be targeting for that kind of thing. And we'll wrap it all into an action plan, which will bring in the top line level of your CIP. It will bring in economic development incentives and that kind of thing you may want to work with, changes to your zoning ordinance. We know you want to be redevelopment ready, and one aspect of that is making sure that you can go seamlessly from master plan to zoning ordinance. So we are going to do that. Once all that's done on the neighborhood cluster level, we will present the draft to staff and then present it to the Planning Commission. At the meeting where we present to the Planning Commission will also be the public engagement and Planning Commission discussion for the next neighborhood cluster. So you see how it kind of overlaps. As we're going, we'll be putting things on the website, getting public feedback, etc. So we are anticipating, I guess, say we do 4 neighborhood clusters, that would be about a 6 to 8 month process. After that, we'll take everything, sit down in a room with staff, come to the Planning Commission and say, all right, when we put it all together like a puzzle, this is what came out. Does this still work now that we're at the citywide level? We're really only thinking that's going to take about a month because we're hoping to do a good enough job at the neighborhood cluster level that we don't have to do a lot of tweaking. And then what we're proposing is what we're calling a double adoption process. As you may know, the Planning Enabling Act at the state level requires you to make the document available for 60-day comment period, then do a public hearing at the Planning Commission, and then bring it to you guys for final approval. But what we're proposing to do is have a public hearing before the comment period, and then during the comment period, have a public open house. And then once the public has been able to weigh in, we'll get the feedback during the comment period. We will hold another public hearing with the Planning Commission after the comment period. And then we'll make any final revisions and bring it to you guys. So what that allows us to do is hear from the public twice at the end of the process, right? So that people don't feel like they got all the way to the end of the process and it's about to be approved and they have something they want to change. They'll have that opportunity before it's finally approved. So anyway, that's how we propose to spend the next 10 to 12 months getting this thing ready to go, creating a document for you guys that will be usable for staff, Planning Commission, and yourselves in making decisions. I think very, very highly of our graphics staff, particularly our art director, Carrie Leitner. I think you're going to be really happy with the way the document looks when we're done. And like I said, we're excited to be here. One other thing I should mention, I mentioned myself locally, the fact that we're hiring in Grand Rapids and Prine and Newhoff. We also will be having staff from the east side of the state at planning commission meetings and community engagement mostly, and also our mapping team over there. So that's kind of the people you'll see from McKenna. Although we do think we can provide you value because we have between us and Prine staff here, and we're not going to be spending your resources, as much of your resources driving, right? We're going to put them into planning. So that's what we're proposing, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Commissioners?
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to have somebody local. I feel confident that being local, you'll have a good vision. You have a little bit more background than what we saw before. But can you just go back to that double adoption process? You lost me a little bit on when that preliminary open house takes place. Is that before step one?
Yeah. Well, as far as the double adoption process, basically what happened is we have a whole document. We wouldn't have any blanks left in it. We take it to staff and get their thoughts. We take it to the Planning Commission in a public hearing format and get their thoughts. Then, during the state required comment period, we take it to the public with a public open house. Not in a formal Planning Commission setting, but in more of a setting where we'll have topic boards and opportunities for people to provide feedback kind of at their own pace and without just public speak or anything like that. And then following that, also at the same time, we'll get, it says in the proposal, the outside entities review. That's obviously required by the state. We'll be sending it to the county and everybody else. We'll send it to the railroads and go into a black hole somewhere. Anyway, yeah, and then we'll come back to staff, then we'll come back to the Planning Commission, and then we'll come to you guys. That's what I mean by double process.
Oh, okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Commissioners, anything else?
Yeah, I'm also glad that you're going to be present at a lot of the planning commission meetings and maybe just commission meetings as a whole too, occasionally. And I'd also like to suggest that we include our youth commission because they are going to be the people, probably 20 years from now, they're going to be living in Walker and using the master plan that we are putting forth now. So I'd like to see that if there's any questions or any kind of surveys or brainstorming that we could possibly involve them as well.
I think that's a great idea. Do they meet regularly, or monthly?
Yes, we're kind of coming at the end of our meetings, but we can definitely pull them together if necessary.
Okay.
So.
I think it'd be great to have them either on their own or as part of a planning commission meeting or something like that.
I'd love to have you even meet with them, like if we have a project here, we could structure one of their youth commission meetings around that so that they can also be interactive as well as like with the public and such.
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
I think schedule permitting both. I like that idea. When we think of the basic framework of when we first started with that, there was a more of a high school age, but a youth type of survey. And I think that's a great opportunity to get some key stakeholders' feedback from that demographic for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's
Good
cool
call.
that you have a youth commission. That's not everyone has that. So.
Okay.
I have a question for Frank, I guess. We kind of got burned. So what kind of background checking references are we going to do?
We will ask Mr. Khorey to give us a list of references. We'll do, from a staff standpoint, reference check. We'll supply that list to you folks as well. And you can feel free to ask questions of their officials. Say how did they relate to city commission, planning commissioners, et cetera. And we'll do our staff diligence on the side.
Okay, thank you.
I think to that point, key thing is I want to support staff on this. With our first go around, we did do the background checks and they did check out, unfortunately. So sometimes you can get the wrong one there. So I'll watch the words, but yeah, I know, but there is a due diligence process. Definitely, we'll we'll go through. I'm for one, I probably waited till last to speak on it then. We've had a number of meetings now off to the side before Chris has come in front of this body, and I'm extremely confident with a commitment and an understanding, and I think a sense of empathy of where we're at too. He understands how we use that document. He's telling us what we need to hear, not what we want to hear, and that's probably a significant difference from our first piece in hindsight now that as we digest that a little bit. So I'm one voice up here, but one that I'm confident. Or we'll come back and get them for the mailbox at some point. So.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Dan.
isn't McKenna also working in a community locally now? Or
Yeah,
has?
Yeah, I mean, we're working in Granville right now, helping them with the Parks and Rec plan. So that's one of your neighbors, right? So we've got that. We are working, depending on your definition of locally, we're working in Holland right now. We just finished a big project in Kalamazoo. We're working in Roosevelt Park outside Muskegon on a master plan. And then as far as, recently we've worked in Coopersville, worked in Bangor, which is down by South Haven. It depends on what your definition of local is, but I will say that since moving to Grand Rapids, I've had plenty to do because we have clients within an hour radius, plenty of them, so.
Thank you.
I guess this may be for, all of us, but is there some kind of a timeline measurement that we're going to be working with to ensure that we are meeting our expectations?
Well, honestly, the way this scope works, we're planning to be at every planning commission meeting for the next year. And hopefully that doesn't become a problem for your planning commission, but we've outlined this as if you were to put it in dates, planning commission meeting dates, we have something to do, basically every planning commission meeting for the rest of the year, and we are planning to be at them. And that'll keep us on schedule. We've outlined a schedule that's going to take about a year, which I know is probably a little longer than you'd hope, but I want to make sure that we, do what we need to do to get the kind of plan that will serve you like your 1998 plan has. And also, there simply is a process the state makes you go through at the end of the process that takes 3 months, no matter what, right? Even if you do the bare minimum. In fact, I've done the bare minimum with some communities. They just wanted to add 2 pages to their master plan. It's like, I'm sorry, this is a 3-month process. Even if all you're doing is adding 2 pages, and you guys are obviously doing much more than that.
Thank you.
I just want you to know, I think it sounds great, and everything that you presented to us tonight and in the documents that we have. And you also know the reason why you are here now. And we just want to make sure that anything that comes up, that you have communication with Frank, so that all of us are aware of what is going on at all different intervals of the project.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and don't go down Butterworth. I live off Butterworth.
I think I'm a slightly better driver now, and I don't make teenage decisions like that Butterworth is a good idea to drive down in a snowstorm. But I'm sure you've gotten the hang of it. I still have not.
Commissioners, anything else
Thank
then? Okay. Frank, anything else from us at this point?
Well, I know this is a lot at once, but what we would ask for, if you're comfortable, is the ability for staff to work with the mayor and Mr. Khorey to finalize the scope. Nothing substantially will change from what you see in front of you. And work with Mr. Khorey to fill in 2 of the big blanks in the contract, which would be deliverables, and then their chart of compensation. Those are really accountability measures. If you're comfortable with that, then we'll work to get those documents executed and begin this process.
I'd make a motion that we allow staff and the mayor to move forward.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion for Commissioner Kent, a second from Commissioner Holland. Any other further discussion on the item? All right, then I'll ask for all in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion passed then. We'll get with Frank and get this put together then. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We'll be back in touch with the stuff Frank mentioned, as well as the references that were requested, and we can't wait to get started.
Good.
Welcome
Thank you.
aboard.
Thank you,
Thanks,
folks.
Chris. And I think while Travis and Scott are getting set up there, one of the things that, to Frank's credit, where this really started to, we caught, I think, our previous situation before it spiraled out of control, because there was a system of checks and balances in there and looking at what's been billed, what's been done. And part of where I think, to Chris's point about a year, I mean, we'd all like this done like next month at the latest, but the unfortunate thing, the deliverables that we really thought we were going to get at this point for what we had paid, there's a bit of a gap there. So I just want to say the process was there. I think Commissioner Gruters brings up a good point of the due diligence of, just following through on that, and I know that we'll do that, so. Had a good, thank you, Chris. Have a good evening. So are we getting autographed copies of this afterwards with all your pictures on the front cover?
The mouse needs to be replaced. You can use the remote one. There should be a remote one there. Yeah, you can use both of them at once, see which one works, but the one with the wire, it's, yes.
All we need is for it to show the slideshow. We can move forward from here.
There you go. Now, the display settings, Dan, you want to help him out with that?
Display settings on top.
Not this way on our computers.
No, we're going to get you there, though.
I have the clicker. There we go. Thank
There
you.
we go.
Okay. So I apologize. I'm mainlining cough drops right now. I'm 4 in the last 10 minutes. So, but this is kind of a big deal for me because this is kind of what we've kind of helped build around here over the last 23 years, and I don't want to miss it. But if I happen to fall down, Travis is ready to jump right in. Just keep Frank away from me, and I think everything's going to be fine. So we're proud to be the first ones, and thanks, Gary, for asking us to come out and do this first. A little bit of organizational management. What does our department look like? We actually operate as a very lean department. You can see that we've got, under the city manager is the city engineer, and then you've got 2 full-time employees. You've got the assistant city engineer and the engineering programs coordinator. That used to be an engineering technician. And then I think the more difficult part comes in where you look at the consultants. And we've got 4 different consulting firms working for us, usually all at the same time. So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes on there. We do our best to kind of manage that. We typically have a summer or seasonal intern. What we try to do is let Travis and Rachel really work with those 2 or with that person to give them a little bit more of a chance to lead and to be managers. And that's worked really well because I kind of then focus more on the projects and working with the consultants and things. And obviously there's the orange arrow there. When I can't get enough cough drops, Travis is the guy and he gets to jump in and handle the day-to-day stuff too. So most of the work that we do can be split into departments or folders. We've got projects, we've got different programs that we administer, we've got boxes that we have to check in terms of compliance. We've got a lot of private development, more than I can ever remember. And then we've got a lot of collaborative efforts that we work on with our different partners in the region. So projects, I'm not going to bore you with telling you about all these projects, but this is our active list here. So we've got the 3 Mile and Walker Avenue dual lefts that'll take place this summer. That's probably going to start in May or June, right in front of the Meyer campus. We've got the Maynard Water Main project down in the south end. It's really phases 2 and 3. We've talked about that several times. That's going to be a midsummer project. We're working very diligently on the Walker Bridge removal in front of Bissell. As late in the day on Friday, we had some good discussions about whether we're really going to be able to get that done this year, and I think we're starting to push a pretty bad position. So we'll probably be back to you at some point to say, it's not worth pushing this so hard that we end up with prices that are 30 or 40% over what they should be. And I think we're probably going to want to talk about pushing that off to 2020, which means getting together with the Bissells and the Betzes and Walker Tool and Dies and folks like that to say, just so that we can plan ahead, here's what's probably going to happen. But I think that's a discussion for another day as well. And then there's some work taking place on the North Park Street Bridge. I know Al Parent was a big proponent of this one, and it got started about 2 years ago. I think it started as a beautification project because a lot of the paint's flaking off, and now it's into a little bit of that and a little bit of structural repair as well. Grand Rapids is overseeing that, so our involvement's kind of limited. We do a really good job, I think, of sharing with them. We'll take a project, they'll take a project. This is their turn, so they're overseeing most of that, but Travis has gone through all of their plans, and we're pretty comfortable we're going to end up with something pretty nice when we're done there. As we do in our staff meetings in our department, we try to look backwards and forwards a little bit. If we're not looking backwards to see that we've accomplished something, then how would we know we accomplished anything? So as far as projects go, we've had a pretty good couple of years with the Leonard Street project. That's what this picture is here on the right. If you remember, we talked a lot at the beginning of that about how we had to go almost 20 feet deep to get down to all of that muck. So the material over on the lower right corner of that material is all that peat and muck. Then you get into that gray clay that's just underneath it, and this is a great illustration of how a road goes together in a really, really bad area, where you've got a stone bed over that clay, and then the sand comes in, and you can see a guy in the background doing a density check to make sure that everything is being compacted as you go. And it's just a good illustration of what we hope is going to be a great project for a long time. Also last year we had a traffic signal at Butterworth and Wilson. That was pretty minimal input for us. But Travis did a really nice job of getting us coordinated into that project to make sure that they were mast arms. And I think it ended up costing us about $30,000 or $35,000 total, so very efficient for us. And then working with Frank a great deal on the I-96 eastbound off-ramp realignment that was at Walker Avenue and Holton Court. So we realigned that, and then come to find out almost right away, here comes a new gas station. The old gas station's knocked down. The whole area is looking revitalized. There's a whole lot of great stuff going on there. And that was through a TEDF grant, which is really economic development money from the state. And then we had the M11 and Remembrance Roundabout. Things were still being wrapped up with that over the last year. We think that's been pretty successful. We still hear a lot of positive comments. That doesn't mean we still don't hear some complaints about how fast some people like to go through it, because that's true too. But we haven't had a very serious accident, which we think is a very positive thing. And then I think our other real project that we're real proud of is the M45 tunnel. That was the project that I didn't think could ever happen, and we talked about it for years. And with a great project team and a whole lot of people pulling all in the same direction, somehow we got that done. Somehow we got through every single hurdle, and I was very proud of that team effort. And the SAW grant was another one that we accomplished. SAW was for stormwater asset management. It allowed us to go out throughout the city and get a stormwater atlas or stormwater inventory that was much better than what we'd had on old drawings that were 30, 40 years old. Now we have a much more accurate, and it's a GIS-based program. And some things that we're looking at for the future, I think the biggest high-profile one is right at the top, working with MDOT on the Fruit Ridge Overpass. I think this picture is kind of a neat picture on the upper right corner, because each one of those little dots or arrows is an accident that's occurred in that area in the last 5 years. And hopefully it's magnified enough on your screens that you can kind of see that the yellow lines going through there are the highway, and then the north and south line is Fruit Ridge, and the east-west line at the bottom is 3 Mile Road. So there are a lot of accidents. They're way more than I had ever envisioned. And I'm hoping that illustrations like this, as they're looked at the federal level, are going to make our project look like a winner, and we'll come home with some big money on that. But other projects we're working on, the Hillside Sidewalk Project, which is a CDBG project, is looking very favorable. We've also got a good chunk of money for the Sunset Hills Avenue resurfacing from Lake Michigan Drive 1/2 mile south. So that's the area that's curb and gutter. It's not the area that's the 2-lane section, but it's a very efficient way to go in there and just resurface that road and keep the curb and gutter where it is. The Kinney Avenue widening one is one that's much anticipated. That is from 3 Mile Road south to Waldorf. We've been talking about that for an awful long time. I think from my perspective, the sidewalk thing is the real important issue there. And what we're trying to do now is get a safety grant, or a TAP grant, I should say, to build trail or sidewalk along with that to connect the Pioneer, the Muscatella, and all the Fred Meyer Trail facilities that we have here at City Hall. So we really think that's going to be a great project. That's looking like it's going to be off a little ways, probably 2021. We kind of swapped out in the TIP process this year to get more money because we didn't have enough money to really to do a big chunk of that. Now we're at the point where we've got a good 70% of the money that we need, but it's 1 year later, and that's kind of some of the swapping that we do with our different neighbors at these Metro Council meetings. And then one that's up and coming, the Richmond turn lanes at Wilson Avenue. We've talked an awful lot and had some public meetings about this. In order for us to have a chance to get a signal at Richmond, we have to have a second lane on Richmond in each direction. So we have to have a dedicated right turn lane so that if somebody stopped at the signal and you want to turn right, you can still do that. So that's one of the small little things that has to be in place so that a future signal can take place. And we're trying to get a safety grant to do that now. I think that's going to have a huge impact by widening that out just a little bit, making it a little bit more open. We're hoping that our friends at MDOT will be helpful with that as well. And then up the street, we've had some great progress in the last few weeks and months with 3 Mile in Remembrance. That's one that we believe as a staff is very important to get to. Had some bad accidents there. The intersection geometry is terrible. And I think probably 2 meetings ago, Frank presented to the commission the idea that that they were willing to throw a traffic signal up there, they being MDOT, if we were willing to have that short section to the south towards our roundabout be a 3-lane road instead of a 4-lane road. And I don't know that at staff level we love that idea, but we love the idea that we could get a signal out of it and we could eliminate some conflict points, hopefully save some lives there. So it's a great compromise, and I think it comes with the spirit of cooperation that we have with those guys. Programs, Rachel couldn't be here tonight, she's on vacation. And we certainly didn't want to stop that. So I said, I need to take a couple pictures of you so that we can remind them who you are. She is the coordinator for essentially our soil erosion program. It's called Soil Erosion Sedimentation Control. There's an acronym for that, SESC, that you might see from time to time. That basically means that any earth disturbance that's within 500 feet of a lake or stream, even if it's a single-family residential house, requires one of these permits, because as soon as you dig a hole, as soon as you take all the topsoil off and a storm comes, it's going to wash a lot of material down into that water body. So state requires those permits, and we are the ones that administer that. Stormwater permitting is kind of part 2 to that. Any site that's going to have any new catch basins, any new storm sewer, any new detention ponds falls under that category, and we really try to carry those 2 permits side by side and work together so that we're not fighting each other too much on those, because they really work well together. And then she does a great job with the community development block grants and helping to kind of just fill that void that comes in about November, December, January as that program's ramped up and some of the other development type things are slowing down. So it's really a perfect fit. We have quite a few compliance things here. NPDES is essentially like the city's stormwater permit that we have to get through the state. And about 10 years ago, they created a new program. The first time they had NPDES, it was just NPDES 1, and only the largest cities in the state had to comply. It was Lansing, Detroit, Grand Rapids. They came back 5 years later and they widened the net and said basically anybody that's kind of in the 20,000 range and probably south of Mount Pleasant, you're going to have to get one of these permits too. So at the time, we calculated about what it would cost to do that, and we were well into the $100,000 range for us to be facilitating those permits. We teamed up, came up with a stormwater ordinance committee. We created the Lower Grand River Organization of Watersheds. We created a whole bunch of collaboration to help with teaming up on different items, and we've got that number down to less than $20,000 a year through that collaboration. So we feel really good about that, and we've been a leader in that. So we're quite proud of it. The picture on the left there, I think it was labeled in our file as the hot noodle face, because my mouth's making a weird face, but you can see the GVMC there. We've been asked to help out with a lot of those kinds of things and lead a lot of those organizations. And we're really proud to say that that was something that saved us a lot of money. On the asset management side, we're getting more and more boxes that we have to check every day. The amount of work that we have to do to keep up with roads, signs, storm sewer, they're talking about guardrail, fencing, all those kinds of things now. It's getting to be quite a bit, and Travis is going to step into this in just a minute and explain that. But we're satisfying 3 or 4 different programs to achieve one goal. And what the hope is, I think at the state level, is they're going to be able to combine that all into one program soon, and it won't take quite as much redundant work from us. But for now, those are requirements. It's stuff that nobody sees. It's stuff that we have to do in the background, but it means that we're eligible for grants. It means that we're eligible for Act 51 money. It keeps us in good standing on things like safety grants. So certainly required. We also do the Act 51 reporting, and Act 51 is related to the gas tax and what our road system looks like, how many miles of major road we have, how many miles of local road we have, and at the end of the year, how many miles did we add of each. So each year we have to add to a map. Some years we don't add any. Some years we add a pretty significant amount if we've had some plats. We add some local roads. If we've had something like Northridge, we add some major roads. All that means more money comes to us to help take care of those roads. The good news is we're adding a brand new road in the system when we do that. We don't need to put so much of that money into that road. It's the older roads that the money really goes towards. And then we also do a lot of bridge inspections. I think we've got 10 or 12 unofficial bridges. I think we might have 8 that are on the actual critical bridge list that we have to follow through. But every 2 years we need to do those. If we end up a month late, they send us a nasty gram and they say, where's your reports? And they say, if you don't get those to us in the next month, we're going to hold back your Act 51 money. So we do our best to comply with that. Private development is something that was kind of the fun part of the job, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. And it's really taken over the last couple of years. There is a lot of work involved in this. And I know Dan's really working his tail off. You know, he's the first car here. Often he's the last car to leave. There's just a lot of work getting pumped out from his office. And so from our perspective, that includes going to the site plan review committees. It includes writing planning commission reports for most every item. And then it includes going to the planning commission to help out with those questions and help facilitate. I think a lot of it's from the history that we have. It's just helpful to know when random questions come up that we can address those. And then also we take a lot of questions from commissioners before and after the meeting as well. When that planning commission approves a project, the work is not done for us. In fact, the work's really just beginning for us, because a lot of times there will be public sanitary sewer, public water main, public road and storm sewer. We review all of those plans, run those all through the necessary approvals and signatures to get them ready for construction inspections and things like that, and then get them ready to actually go out and start working. Once they start working, then we're all about the inspection of those projects and the certification for those projects, which again includes all those different components to the road. So still a lot of work there that we spread out on. Regional collaboration. These are some things we're really proud of. I think when we talk about the Fruit Ridge Overpass, last year we worked on a build grant that Mayor Heisinger worked an awful lot on. We were unsuccessful. That's a federal grant to try to get close to $18 million. We turned that around real quick and said, well, if that didn't work, let's try another one. And now we've got an infra grant. I don't know exactly what that stood for. Something like infrastructure. But it's a similar type grant. The match is a little bit more, but MDOT is really into this now. They've gone to the extent of hiring a consultant. We spent a good share of our time, probably 50% of my time, over the month of February helping to put this together. And we're very hopeful that we're going to get some good luck with that. And one of the interesting things, the picture on the lower right corner, that's the Fruit Ridge Overpass. And on this, I think it was the second to last day to put all the graphics together, they kept saying, we really need a picture of somebody on that overpass. And if it could be somebody walking to school, that'd be awesome. And we couldn't stage it, but Travis went out there, scheduled some time. I think he had Tom Klein with him in the big red truck with the flashers to make sure it was safe. And he's taking pictures of buses after buses and trucks after trucks and how tight it is in there. And at the last minute, he looked over and he saw this, what I like to think of as the Sasquatch photo. This guy with an enormous beard driving his bike across the bridge because he had to, probably. I mean, that's probably the route that he takes to get to work from home. And it just illustrates the fact that this is a really, really busy spot, and we're hoping it's going to help a lot when the feds look at that and try to determine if we're successful or not. Along the M11 corridor, it's difficult to list all the different accomplishments we've had there. We've actually looked at just about every intersection throughout the city of Walker, from Granville all the way up to Talmadge Township. And we've had many, many projects together. With MDOT, I think we've had something like 15 projects in the last 20 years that have been collaborative efforts. And I can't think of a one that hasn't been looked at as successful at the end, because we can do so much more together, and they've become great friends. I think it's a great help. With Grand Rapids, we have an awful lot of collaboration as well. I think the big one for this is the North Park Street Bridge. We look at North Park Street as a Walker Road and a Grand Rapids Road, and the bridge then is also both. It's a 50-50 split. Anytime money is supposed to be spent on that, it's supposed to be a 50-50 split, so we are truly partners. And here they are helping out with some of the bridge work. But if you look back in time, there was a time when they built the roundabout on the east side. And they asked if we could change all of ours to a 3-lane road. And we looked at it and said, ours is very different than yours. Yours is bike lanes and parks and roundabouts. Ours is heavy industrial, paving guys, concrete recyclers, landscape people. And we worked together to determine there was a point in the middle where we could change that from 4-lane to 3-lane so they could get what they want, we could preserve what we needed, and we could still get all the trail connectivity that was really what we were after. So that's worked out great. And then with utilities, specifically sanitary sewer and water main, most of our work is with Grand Rapids. Those guys are really part of our department. You know, we work an awful lot with them. But it's not to be overlooked that we have some relationships with Plainfield Water and North Kent Sewer as well, because go back to North Park Street, those are areas, there's small areas there that are in those districts. And they're also good partners when we need them. And then we've had some discussions with Granville over the years about the south tip of Walker. What are we going to do if and when sewer is needed down there? And specifically the Fensky site, because it's not like sewer is really needed for one specific area down there, except for that one. And if that develops, then we have to look at how much more might want to develop and come that way. And Granville's been very good to us to say, we'll be open-minded to that. And Grand Rapids has been very good to say, we'll be open-minded to that. So again, great partnerships and collaborations there. The little medallion over there was a nice surprise on the left side. Daryl and I we were asked to go to an MDOT meeting 2 years ago, and they called us up to the front in this enormous statewide meeting and presented us with these coins and said we were MDOT employees for a day, and gave us this good leadership, good government award. No pensions. Yeah, really disappointing. But it's one of those little things that you kind of keep in your office. It's a great reminder that somebody appreciated it. So we're in good standing with those folks. And then other things that we do that are collaborative with our bridge inspections. The amount of testing that a bridge inspector needs to go through is insane. It's like a 2 or 3 week program, and then you have to have quite long refreshers every 2 years just to stay certified. And for us, with just a handful of bridges, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, Kent County has over 200 bridges, and for them it makes a lot of sense. And so what they've done is they're acting like a consultant to us with one of their bridge inspectors. And so he comes out as the primary bridge inspector. Travis is the second man on the crew. He helps with the local knowledge, while the Kent County guy helps with the technical structural knowledge, and it really works out great. That program's going really, really well. Through the Grand Valley Metro Council, we have a whole bunch of different committees that we're a part of. There's more to it than this, but this is kind of a quick list, especially as related to transportation. But you've got the technical committee that deals with all the grants. You've got the transportation programming study group that actually selects the projects in advance of the technical committee's review. The non-motorized committee is a great resource for working with trails and sidewalks. And then ELGRO, which we mentioned before, has really become kind of a force in the area for the environment. And we're really proud. And we've taken leadership roles in all these positions, all these committees, so we're very proud of that. The other most recent collaboration with relative to CDBG is that the county is now trying to harness all of this money together so that we can work on like a sidewalk project like we're hoping to get this year as one big group. There's going to be some stumbling blocks, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable in the first year, but it really is a good collaboration that we're at least starting to think about it and talk about it. So we're proud of that, and we're going to see where that goes. Regis is one that's often forgotten. Walker was the pilot community for Regis. So in 1997, when we got Regis started, Jim Hatch was kind of the main guy, and I was kind of the guy on his coattails following him around. The deal was worked out so that the North Park Street and 4 Mile and West River area was the area. And we used that because it had a combination of Grand Rapids utilities, Plainfield utilities, Kent County roads, Walker roads, Grand Rapids Bridge. It was a great area to get started. And so we were really at the heart of what Regis has become today. And I think we're quite proud of that too. And then along those same area there, we deal with all different kinds of flooding. But the one that requires the most collaboration is flooding for the Grand River. And we had a little bit of that this weekend as the levels were starting to rise. And it has required and continues to require a lot of work with Grand Rapids, a little bit with Plainfield. Grand Rapids, we're to the point where there's a gate valve in Turner Avenue that we have to know to go down and remove the gate valve for all of our storm sewers to work together when the water starts to rise up in the Grand River. So it requires a lot of input and a lot of good people working together. Departmental collaboration, start moving a little quicker here, my voice is going. But with the finance department, we do a lot with what's called frontage charges for sewer and water. I could probably spend 30 minutes talking about trying to describe what that is. I'm still not sure I understand it completely. It's quite complicated, but basically when a developer comes in, if there's existing sewer out front and that property owner hasn't paid for it, there's a frontage charge, kind of like a special assessment that's associated with it. So we work through a lot of that with Dan DeVries. We also have quite a few accounts with escrows for construction inspection. So all the different plats and site condos, Westtown Apartments that has public sewer and water, all of those require inspection, and we do that through those departments with Dan DeVries. We also work on the project budgeting, something that's relatively new called the GASB 34 program, the Government Accounting Standards Board. Another one of those boxes that we have to check, but unfortunately, or fortunately for us, Dan's the one that has to check it. But we have to work with him quite a bit on that. And then the Act 51 as well, we're the official streets administrator, but he does all the work. I mean, I probably spend less than an hour working on what he spends 10 or 20 hours working on, and he does a great job. The DPW has probably been our biggest collaboration. I love the picture off to the right because that was when we really started to team up and work on things well together, and we were rolling out some new asset management tools. And this was from an old presentation that we gave to the City Commission about road ratings. And so as we were talking about the road ratings, it was us four guys standing out over a crumbling road, talking about, Gary says this needs a total rebuild. Travis says it needs a micro seal. Mark's talking about the money. I'm looking for lunch. And then you get Kathy saying you're all fired. So, but that's honestly how it works. You kind of have to look at these road projects from all different angles and then do it in a collaborative way. So with them also, we've created a budget decision tool that we can use. It's kind of the heart of our asset management program. That's the focus point. Travis is going to spend 5 or 10 minutes at the end here talking through that. We also work extensively with the sign shop. We work on truck routes and load limits, storm sewer mapping like the SAW grant. We're constantly making tweaks and updates to that. ADA compliance is the American Disabilities Advocacy compliance, making sure that we have handicap ramps everywhere that we need them, making sure that we have push buttons at all of the crosswalks and things like that. We also help them out with as-builts. Well, I think we're going to be looking at gathering all the as-builts, which are like the old road plans, and those might be dispersed through the DPW here in the future. And then also dealing with our highway rules and regulations, which is what does our standard catch basin look like? What does our standard curb look like? What's a standard residential road look like? All of those kinds of things. Working, again, a lot with planning and building, which is now CDD. We kind of went through a lot of this before with Site Plan Review and Planning Commission, but there's also, there's a whole lot more. There's, as every agenda comes out for the ZBA, we take a look and see if there's items in there that might have a public health and safety implication, and write reports if they do. Work with the ordinance committee. I know Rachel's working with them on some trees right now. Work a lot with the Mineral Mining Review Board, and this excavation example on the right is a great example of that. We used to have mining operators that would come in and go 50 feet deeper than their mine plan would allow, and then they would just slop it back in with excess dirt. And we got together and said, that's a really, really bad idea, because then somebody's going to want to build a structure on that later. So we've got some details like this that I think have been great for that. Also working with numerous precise plats, and I think Walker is kind of the leader, innovator in the area on that. Lots of master plan updates, as we just talked about. And from time to time, zoning violations. I think Travis gets hooked a lot on these. He spends a lot of time out in the field trying to kind of do some counseling, but then also counsel enough so that it doesn't come back to here and we have angry residents in here 3 or 4 meetings in a row. We do everything we can to try to help and resolve those in advance. With the manager's office, we have a peachy relationship as shown by these shirts. Working on the CIP, newsletter items, FOIA requests. We've worked a lot in the past on the Metro Act, which is telecommunications permits. I think that's going to be phased over to DPW with a new employee. Lots of city commission interaction like this. Budget time. We've also got a lot of utility stuff that we work on with Daryl. Daryl handles most of the utility advisory boards, but we've been involved in that since 2000 when the utility advisory board was created. So we can kind of step in at any time and work on a lot of the subcommittees in that group. And then certainly standing LDDA, and the last item there is pretty much anything Daryl asks us to do, we do. A couple other departments, assessing, we just do kind of a lot of general cleanup with them. When we see a parcel line that's not right, it seems like we're, once a week, once every other week, we're in there talking about things like that. And then we'll get the occasional call, hey, I've got a realtor at the front desk, or I've got a property owner, can you come down and help us work through some issues? So we do a lot of that. Recreation and WIFC, mostly mapping and plotting out materials today, but I think the picture over to the right is kind of cool because it shows the area in red, which is City Central Park. And that was actually a project that we managed, and one of my favorite projects I think that we've ever done because of the size and the impact that it's had on the community. So we're super proud of that. Big fans of Greg Long, obviously. We do a lot with police and fire. Good relationships, I think, too. I mean, you could tell from watching us all interact that we all have a good time and like working together. But a lot of the work we do with these two departments is Regis related. We talk about construction projects, like if we take a bridge out, what's the impact going to be on your department? We need to talk about that stuff early and often to make sure that we're all planning ahead. I think we need to talk about PD. We're also involved in traffic control orders, and we get called out occasionally on accidents because we want to talk about what can we learn from this. Is there something here that we can do to make an improvement, to tweak something, and we always want to look for that. And then with the fire department, we also talk about the water system because it's absolutely important for them to have a good water system with adequately spaced hydrants and good fire protection. And we've done a lot of great things with them here on the north end lately. A couple of miscellaneous things. We do an awful lot of work with trails. Again, lots of things that we're proud of here, but we helped start the Michigan Trails and Greenways Coalition, which is a group of all of the local trail groups. And we did that here in our offices, along with the Friends of the Walker, what used to be Highland Trails. As Carol knows now, it's not Highland anymore. And then a lot of work with Kent County Parks to get a lot of that stuff doing. So we may not be out at the forefront of that now, but we're excited about what we've been able to accomplish. Drainage, again, we're working on the localized nuisance issues, working on the regional Grand River type issues, and now we've got a whole nother subject there. It's working with FEMA on 2 different manuals that we have to adopt that are somewhere in the 60 to 100 page long each, where we have to have annual updates, just like an emergency management plan, to make sure we're always ready for the big flood. We also do some traffic counts. This is about the time, I think I was talking at an Elk Grove forum one time, and somebody snapped this picture, and I thought there's only one guy even paying attention. Everybody else is in their phone, and I've lost him. So hoping that we don't get to that point here, but it happens, right? And then just to wrap up that stuff, we have a lot of GIS work, obviously, with mapping and Regis. We do some intelligent transportation stuff with MDOT and with Grand Rapids. Work a lot with the Kent County Drain Commissioner on county drain projects and county drain problems, like the Sexton Drain that has been a big topic of late. And just about every plat project has some involvement from the county. And then the sidewalk inspection program is a program we do every 2 years, and that's going to kick in this summer as well. So I think I'm about done. I might have 5 or 6 more words, but Travis is going to walk you through the road ratings and the budget decision tool.
Scott will tell you I don't often feel bad for him, but I actually feel pretty bad for him. And hearing his voice go, he's been coughing all day long. And you can obviously tell this is a labor of love for him. Started the department, really wanted to tell the story. That was a mouthful, and like he said, we could probably talk your ears off about this for more time than you'd ever hear about. So Scott kind of gave a good overview of the department's initiatives, things that we work on. He wanted me to hit for about 5 minutes to talk about asset management. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do that. Okay, so I purposely kept this slide blank. Stuff will pop up in a second. But I did it for a reason, because that term in the lower right-hand corner, asset management, is a loaded term. I mean, that's a very broad umbrella. So today we're specifically going to focus on pavement asset management. If you don't remember anything about this talk, if you can remember what's in that green box at the top, that would be helpful. So the right fix on the right road at the right time. That's ultimately what we're after. That's what all of these compliance programs we deal with are after. That's our end goal. How do we get the right fix on the right road at the right time? So you're going to see a couple different logos pop up here. Scott mentioned about how we partner with MDOT. On the compliance side, and I tried to put the slide together in a way that kind of tells a history. So we take a step back when I was a little baby, probably. You had MDOT around here, and they gave you your gas tax money, your Act 51 money. And so every year they just, like Scott said, we do this mileage certification. How many miles of roads do you have that are major, big roads and local, small roads? Based on that, goes through a calculation and you get this much money. Here's your money, go spend it. Well, the years go on and they want to know, well, how are you spending it? So we're going to audit you. So we have the Act 51 financial report that we work with too, 2 separate reports that we do every year. And then of course, as we all know what happened in Minnesota a couple years ago with the big bridge collapse, that has put a heightened highlight on bridge inspections. So another mandate, all things you need to do to keep your Act 51 money. No more funding, just make sure you report on this. Well, at the time I was hired about 13 years ago, this Government Accounting Standards Board came up with this Rule 34. And I remember when Scott hired me, he said, "You're going to do Gadsby 34." And I said, "What is that?" And he's like, "I don't know. You're going to have to figure that out. And we're going to need to comply with it." So we worked with the finance department, and it's basically a rule that says all of your infrastructure, put a financial number on it. How much is your right-of-way worth? How much is your road worth? Your storm sewer, your sidewalks? So inventory it, put a number on it, and then every year going forward, as you build more, update that number. It influences our bond ratings. It was an effort that took a lot of effort on the front end. Now it's a lot easier to kind of keep up to speed. Transportation Asset Management Council, it's also hard to believe, came out around the time that I was hired. And I remember when they came out, they said, "We're here to help you do asset management on your roads." And they are, and they do help us do it. They've also come up with more and more mandated compliance requirements that we have to meet. We continue to meet them. We have good partners there, like Scott said. But they started out, we'll get into PASER ratings a little bit more here in a second, but that's how we rate our roads on a 1 to 10 scale. That's kind of how they started out. And I said, well, even though you report through MDOT on how you're spending your Act 51 money, we want some more technical details. And so give us this annual investment report so that we can dig into a little bit more about, are you really doing the right fix on the right road at the right time? And so we report on that. And one that's coming up in 2020 that will be due, we now have to have a formalized written transportation asset management plan. We do have a written down transportation asset management plan. It's about 4 pages long right now. This one needs to be a lot more thorough. But ultimately, after the right fix on the right road at the right time. Scott mentioned this earlier. All of this is hopefully going to get wrapped up into this Michigan Infrastructure Council. The best way to describe that is integrated asset management, because we don't know what the heck it is other than that. But it's a state initiative to say transportation, water, stormwater, maybe signs and other things as time goes on, private utilities, public utilities. Are you guys all coordinating your plans? So with the goal, I believe their goal is like 1 cut. Don't open cut the road anymore. No, we'll see if we can get to that level. But and like Scott said, especially in West Michigan, we've had a lot of collaboration. And I think John Weiss from our Metro Council is kind of heading as a major player in this infrastructure council. So they're kind of looking at our communities here on the west side to set the example for the rest of the state. So asset management, mouthful. This is all stuff we do that means nothing really to what we do actually in the city. So let's take a step back here, the bigger picture. Pavement asset management, let's talk about the theory. There's a complex looking graph at the left-hand side and 2 pictures of cars on the right-hand side. There's a little bit simpler. I like to start with the simple. So we'll start with the cars on the right-hand side. So whenever you talk about pavement asset management, because we're in Michigan, we liken it to automobiles and how you maintain them. And so we've got a nice new automobile on the top and a piece of junk on the bottom. And so how you maintain each vehicle is obviously different. If you have a brand new vehicle, we're going to change oil, take it to the car wash, do all these little preventative maintenance steps on it to keep it nice and new. If we have a junker on the bottom, we're going to fix it literally with duct tape like that one is, and just try to hold it together as long as we can until that thing won't go down the road anymore. And that's honestly the methodology that comes behind this right fix on the right road at the right time. And that gets us to the graph on the left. And it's basically keep your good roads good and let your bad roads get bad. Because on this cost graph here, you can see that roads deteriorate along that red line. And they have an exponential deterioration point. And you can pay $1 for preventative maintenance in the area that's circled. And as soon as it drops off that cliff on the drop, you're paying $6 to $8 to do replacement types of costs on your older roads. So that's kind of the theory behind pavement asset management. Sounds crazy, but if we got a good road, we want to do everything we can to keep it good. If a crack opens up, we want to crack seal it, right? Meanwhile, people say, well, my road's horrible. Why aren't you doing anything with it? Well, because we're trying to limp it along like a junker vehicle until we have enough money or a grant to actually rebuild that thing, make it a nice new road, and then maintain it properly. That's how you honestly stretch your dollar the furthest with it. So that's the theory. So how do theory's nice, but we got to apply it. And we know that we can't all operate in a theoretical world. So how we do asset management in Walker is this little spreadsheet. You'll hear a lot of communities use RoadSoft. That's a database that Michigan Tech makes and provides. That's one of the methodologies that the Transportation Asset Management Council teaches. The other one is this simplified network approach. And this is actually the first thing they taught when I was brand new. I went to a training. I heard about this. Scott can tell you, I came back all excited. And we've been using it since. So there's actually 4 main things we'll step you through here. So the first is inventory. So any asset management that you do, you need to know like what you have. So we know we have major or big roads and local or smaller roads. And we know how many miles we have of them. Well, if we multiply the miles times the number of lanes, we get a little better number. We call it lane miles, right? Because some roads might be 5 lanes wide, and that costs more to work on than a 2-lane road wide road. So we total all that up, and we see that we've got 269.6 lane miles of roads. Okay, so step 2 is aging. And that's simple. We just multiply it by years. So there's this concept that if we've got 269 lane miles, every year the entire system ages 269 lane mile years. It's just a year older. That's just a way of saying our entire road network is a year older than it was the previous year. So step 3 gets us into our maintenance and repair options, and this is the meat and potatoes of this. And we've got our mix of fixes, and then how much life extension each one provides. You can see full reconstruction like unlettered might get you 20 years. Crack sealing, like we do on a lot of roads, might get you 3 years. And of course, each fix has an associated cost. You can see that crack sealing is really cheap for the life extension you get, and reconstruction is really expensive for the life that you get. And then, of course, then what we do is we fill in the number of lane miles in that particular year that we're interested in doing. So last year we did 2 lane miles of reconstruction, 11 lane miles of 2-inch overlay, and 10 lane miles of crack seals. Multiply that out by the numbers on the left, that gets us lane mile years gained, and then we have our actual cost. So you can see in the last budget cycle, we had an actual cost of like $1.3 million. Now that's not all out of our budget. A lot of that is the Leonard grant that we received. But that's money going into the system. So we do all of that, and we say, okay, you can see that we did all for $1.29 million, we got 213 lane mile years gained, but we know that it aged 269 lane mile years. So you do the math on it, and you notice that we're a little over 50 lane mile years lost. What's that mean? It means our roads got worse, right? By how much? I'll get to that on the next slide. So this is a tool that we started and we built, and probably 5-6 years ago kind of turned it over to DPW, and they're the ones that are in it day to day, because the data in here is local to Walker. This cost per lane mile is, I remember Mark Koenig doing a lot of work over the last decade I gave him some initial numbers. Hey, here's what the TAMC people say. And he says, okay, well, let me look through my invoices and we'll start normalizing this out. Okay, and I'm always talking about life extension. Are these numbers adequate or not? And so I think they've really done a good job of kind of refining this tool over the years. This is got a couple, the official name of this is like a network lifecycle approach. We call it the budget decision tool because it helps us give a reasoning for when we ask for road money, why, our actual budget. This is the tool that we're using that's kind of helps setting that number. One thing I want to highlight on this tool is it's not a perfect tool. You need to have a balanced mix of fixes. And one thing we've been noticing over the years is that, especially the last 5 years or so, we've had a lot of reconstruction projects. We've had a lot of grants. That's great. We'll keep applying for grants. At some point, the well's got to run dry, and we're going to have to share the money with some other municipalities here. But we had that reconstruction, we had the crack seal, which we were always doing. But we've done a lot of 2-inch overlays, and I think it's because a lot of people like it, right? It's nice black pavement, you can push a stroller down it, rollerblade on it. People a lot of times don't like their neighborhood streets chip sealed. Chip sealing is more, cost effective. But in order for this tool to work over a long time period, we want to see every one of those fixes used, right? Every tool in our toolbox should be used at some point. And then the other thing is, so we talked about the big spreadsheet is the whole network, all of our roads theoretically in the city of Walker. How are they doing? They went down 53 lane mile years. Now, what roads do we work on? That's that little stool emblem down there. That was from an old presentation we did about a decade ago. And, the theory of asset management would say, you just use your technical data. You make all your decisions on that. You only work on your good roads. You let your bad roads just go to junk, right? And that would be, that really hard on that technical arm. Well, we know that's not how the real world works. We know that there's political input, that, we can't let the bad roads get just atrocious. We got to do something on them at some point. We also know that we can't be spending all of our money in one ward. There's 3 wards in the city. We need to spread that out. And then we also know that we have local experience through engineering and public works. Some roads just last longer than others. They just kind of buck the system. So we talk about this 3-legged stool approach that helps us select our road projects, which gets us into this next step on measurement. That technical arm of the stool, we actually go out and drive in this van that the Metro Council owns and we pay a part of that's got all these sensors and computers in it. We go out and drive every single road in the city. Now we're doing it every year as they've gotten more efficient. And all of those sensors pick up on all kinds of road distresses and provide all kinds of road ratings. The book to the right is the road rating we focus the most on, which is our eyeball. So the state of Michigan, that's a standardized road rating throughout the state of Michigan that TAMC and all these organizations want us to use. It's on a 1 to 10 scale. So we drive this van and we rate with our eyes and we pick up all this other data. So we get all this data, we sort through it. That gives us our technical data that we then apply to our road asset management budget decision tool for what particular roads we'll be working on. So evaluation, we've been at this for a little over a decade now. So we actually have charted this. So the blue line is the major roads, the green line is the local roads. And if I took all of our ratings over all of the years and I averaged them out and I weighted them by lane miles and did that, and that's exactly what all these numbers are, you get this graph. And so you can see that we had a pretty sizable drop from 2007-8 until about 2010-11, and then we kind of flatlined out to there. Well, why was that? It's because we weren't funding the economic downturn. We were not funding our roads with enough money. It was the very beginnings of our asset management program, and it proved itself out very quickly. We were running our budget decision tool and running huge negative numbers, and if we had a precipitous drop. We then increased our road funding, and we kind of flatlined out, especially with the help of a lot of grants. So this little arrow thing is kind of a, it's kind of a pretty, nothing earth-shattering in this statement, but this is what we've seen over the last decade is when we have increased investment, we achieve a positive lane mile years in our budget decision tool, we get better roads, our PASER ratings go up. And when we have level investments, there's no change. There's a neutral lane mile years approach around 0 is the balance. The roads are about the same. And when that number is negative, they drop. Now, with that being said, we haven't run these numbers recently. I think about 5 years ago we ran it, and we were looking at, it was kind of like if you wanted to have a full mix of fixes, how much money would you need to just maintain the status quo? And about 5 years ago it was, okay, assuming we get so many grants, and there's a lot of assumptions in this, we said we need about $1.2 million out of the general fund to maintain our major and local roads, along with our grant money and everything, at the status quo. Well, I think we've been running around an $800,000 number most years, and it's been offset by the fact that we've gotten some pretty large grants. So we've been able to kind of hold that status quo. But that's not to say that, that number 2 was 5 years ago, and we've had a lot of cost increases that are going up. So road asset management, like I said, I could talk to you for way too long. I've already probably talked for too long, so don't realize how long I was up here for. It's a nuance, there's lots of levels to this thing. If anyone has any further questions on it, we'd be more than glad to sit down and talk to you about it further.
And
And we will send this presentation and those charts and graphs to you too, because it's a lot to absorb in one night. In the past, as new commissioners have come on, we've sat down and went through the budget decision tool with them one-on-one, spent a good half an hour talking through it so that it makes sense. We also need to update it. If you look at some of the numbers in there are a little bit outdated for the inventory. So we're due to get back together with the DPW again and say, let's freshen this up too.
Would you mind sending the Pazer map to these folks?
Yeah.
It's a map that shows you all the segments of the streets and how they're rated.
So we actually, that data is now, I believe it's all uploaded through the TMC website, so I think I'll probably just send a link to you. It'll be an interactive map you can see.
I just want to say that, excuse me, it's an excellent presentation that you gave. There are definitely a lot of thought and input that went into this, but I know there's a lot of things that we need to thank you for, because there are a lot of things that we don't see behind the scenes or things that you do on a regular basis. This is the outcome. We get to see the completed work and the projects, and they're all done very well. So I just want to thank you all very much.
Well, thank you. We've been lucky the last couple of years, so keep that in mind when we have a bad project in the next year or two. It happens.
Commissioners, anything else?
I see, like when you do a 2-inch overlay or whatever, that I look at that and you drive it and pretty soon, over a few years later, you start seeing the cracks where they were before. And so when you do I call it crush and shape. You grind up the blacktop with the gravel. You're going to mix it up. You're going to take some of it off. But with that ground up blacktop, you get a little better drainage on the upper portion of your road. Would that, I'm sure it's going to cost more, but will that extend the life?
It's a lot like an overlay, and it's really good for the country road sections. Like at O'Brien, maybe a Maynard, where you don't have curb and gutter that you have to match up to, because like you said, you can lift the road up just a little bit. Drainage works even better. I don't know that we've done a lot of those here, and most of those decisions actually come through the DPW. And we give them a whole lot of input, but they had a couple of years where they did a lot of chip seals, and they got a lot of complaints, and a lot of people were really unhappy, even people that sat up here. And people were a lot happier when the roads were just simply repaved, because they were painted black. They lasted 4 or 5 years. So it's tempting to go back to that and say, we'll just spend all our money on resurfacing. But if they were to do like a chip seal and then come back in and do an overlay over the top of that, or a micro seal and do an overlay, or a micro seal and do a chip seal, all these different combinations, you can do something to stop the reflective cracking, give the road some more life, and then maybe 5 years later you can do your overlays and save some money. So we still need to strive for that mix.
And even with the crush and shape idea, though, the beauty of the budget decision tool is that we can input any fix in there. That's populated with the fixes that Public Works was comfortable with at the time, based upon feedback and what their experiences was with different fixes. But that can obviously be talked about, and it fits right into how we do pavement asset management.
Right, and I talk about, I look at just like you take 2 inches off, you put 2 inches back over it, in a few years you got your reflective cracks right back. That Band-Aid didn't last very long, is the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And for example, 3 Mile, how thick is that blacktop? How many years has it been there? And it would be costly to grind it all up and work your way back up with that. But will that extend? What I'm trying to find out, will I get the more money give me longer road life?
If it's spent the right way. Yeah, if you give us more money and we spread it out among all kinds of different fixes, we can almost guarantee you that you'll get more road life.
But what I'm saying, is there a better way than like on 3 Mile, for example, that's a highly trafficked road, to take, we take 2 inches off and then we put new on, and then pretty soon we're right back.
Well, it gets tough when we have curb and gutter roads like 3 Mile, right? 'Cause then our elevation's set, right? So some of these more country road section fixes where we can do crush and shape and then add on top of it, it's tougher to do. You have less mix of fixes to pick from because we've got set curb and gutter, unless we're going to reconstruct all the curb and gutter, and that's incredibly costly too.
No, but I guess, so what you're telling me is you feel you'll never have to rebuild 3 Mile Road?
Which section of 3 Mile are you talking about, Dan?
I'm just saying from Bristol to Alpine. I mean, you get there by the fire station, you know, there's different places, and it's like, you know, you can feel it, and it's, so I always wondered why. I see the road, like, the road commission does a lot of that, and you know, you go back later and the roads seem to be holding up good.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there something that we can do for a little bit more money but still get more? You know, I didn't know.
Yeah, we tried some things to cover up the reflective cracks with fabrics and things like that, or geotextile blankets. We did some on Remembrance Road that turned out pretty good enough that MDOT's using them now on some of their roads, and they've been calling us for reference. We can do some things like, there was a mastic, like a rubberized asphalt strip that we would paint down the center line to give it some more life. That helps to seal the road up so it's waterproof, so when you pave over the top, it will hold back the reflective cracking for even longer. So yeah, there are things that we can do prior to overlays that will help.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking is you're looking at it, and, you know, I think there's places that if it needs to be done, hopefully we can do that and get the cost's gonna go up a little, some, but we can get a longer life out of that road, so, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioners, anything else?
I got one more.
Go ahead, Dan.
The Wilson and 3 Mile, are you talking 3-lane from roundabout to roundabout?
I think what was pitched was between the roundabout going northwest on Remembrance Road, where it's a 4-lane section now. The pitch was if that was to turn into a 3-lane, then MDOT could consider putting a signal in where we've been asking for it at 3 Mile and Remembrance. And I think, Frank helped me out, but I think you pitched that a couple meetings ago.
That's correct.
Okay, and then, but then going back to the west after that second roundabout would be?
And we sure hope nothing. You know, it seems counterintuitive to me to be telling MDOT, let's do road diets all over the place, when we've been saying for the last 50 years, please widen Wilson Avenue.
Right.
So, you know, I think we want to be careful about how often we ask that. But if it was in the spirit of cooperation to get that signal, and we're not moving any curb, it's still there, it can still be restriped later. It seems like a fair compromise to get what we want.
So the intersection basically is going to be 3 lanes, and then going west, it'll go back out to 4.
We hope so.
Okay.
But they still have the option. I mean, they're MDOT.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
They could restripe it all the way to the highway, but you'd have a lot of people passing in the center turn lane on that long stretch.
I think so. Okay, thank you.
Dan or Daryl?
Yeah, I just want to thank Scott and Travis and Rachel for putting this together, and as you can see, there's just a ton of stuff that they're responsible for, and they breeze through a lot of that stuff. So if there are any of those topics on there that we want to see more information on at a future meeting, or at their next iteration here in a year, whether it's utilities or digging into something more detailed, let us know, and we can, you know, they could prepare that like Travis did on the budget decision tool, which has been a great assistance for us as we're going through the budget. In the last few years, we've been budgeting about $1 million, 500 in each local and major, and that fluctuates maybe a little bit one way or another, but it's been holding our own, and yeah, if we had more money that we're putting into it, we'd get more lane miles. I just have a question for Travis. Do you have an idea, Travis, on the GASB 34, what is the approximate current value on our infrastructure that you came up with?
That's a nice question. Quite honestly, no, I don't, because once I did the initial work like 10 years ago and handed it over to finance, it was just every year, hey, how much sidewalk did we add? And we just run the calculations.
I want to say it was like 60 million or something like that.
It's high, and that was a hard number to set because we wanted to make sure our numbers were, you know, auditable by accountants, but, you know, like we said, do you have a linear stretch of right-of-way? That's like priceless, you know, but I can only put $1.25 per square foot, you know, on the cost. So the number feels a little, we tried to give a fair number, not too high, not too low. I could go look it up in a few minutes, but I do not remember off the top of my head. It is high. It's a very high number.
Yeah, we could go through a very painful exercise to try to ramp that up, and I bet we could. I don't know what we get out of it.
But doesn't right away sell for, we'll say what an acre of land in the area is selling for, so if you was on Alpine, it'd be one price, where you was over on Waldorf Street, it'd be a different.
That's absolutely
Basically,
correct.
your right
Absolutely
away,
correct.
it's based on the.
So when we did Gatsby 34, we did it kind of like our road network. We took more of a system approach. We knew some areas would cost more or less, and for infrastructure right away and such, and we just kind of came up with an average cost to make it. We did Gatsby 34, we had to do it in such a way such that when the accountants read it, they were like, okay, here's your logic, it's logical and it's defensible. We could have made it far more complex, but.
Travis has been very, very good at this as an influence on me over the years, trying to find ways to keep it simple. He really does a good job with stuff like that, where he could be spending 20 hours a week working through some fancy RoadSoft program, but he migrates more towards something that I think makes a lot of sense with the DPW folks. It's easy to explain, and it's accountable. It works. So it's been great.
Yeah, I know we fire hose you with the information, but at the end of the day, the goal is to kind of get a tool that everyone can understand. So like I said, if there are any questions on the budget decision tool, feel free to call me or send me an email, and I'll sit down with you and actually take the time to go through it in a little more organized manner.
Commissioners, anything else? I think the last couple, first off, thank you for being the test pilots on this. I'm trying to think which meeting we were talking about this, and you very graciously were volunteered, or you did raise your hand, to offer to do this for the first one. You know, and when we think of the why we're doing this, it's the education, the connection, because for some of the commissioners, as we do this in subsequent months, there's going to be department heads that we might not see but once, twice a year. So it's a very impactful piece of, thank you for doing it. You know, you share with us, you know, the why we did it is the education, the connection, but how you do things and what we can do to help you. I think we all have a better understanding. But I had 3 takeaways for me that stuck out was, it's the reminder of what you focus on is not just the roads and projects. You know, you really touch air quality, because we have to do that from reporting and a grant standpoint. And it's also the water and the environmental impact and all the work that we've done there. And I think it is something that is, when we think of those Turner Avenue, the floodgates, that's something that we have to be aware of. We made an investment with Grand Rapids to help even lower some insurance rates of some of the businesses in that area down there in the first ward. So that was the why we did that. I think of all the compliance reporting and accounting, it's intense, it's detailed. That's just nuts to me, but you guys do a great job with it. And really as much, I appreciate on behalf of all of us, as much money that we've invested into roads and projects and compliance and everything else, you're right there making sure what we have due coming back to us is coming back. So it's not just we have it going out. You're very diligent in the details with that. And the other thing too is just the spirit of collaboration. There's a lot of work, like you'd said, with the different departments, the police, fire, finance, everybody, including the elected officials. And I think on behalf of all of us, A, thank you for going first, but B, thank you for the amount of detail, very educational, very helpful. And I don't think we can say thanks enough. So. And thanks for toughing through it. So
Thanks for the opportunity.
yeah, there might be 6 of us up here with all the cold meds, but you did well. So thanks, Scott.
Go to sleep.
Thanks,
now.
Trav. Very good. Thank you. All right. We are in the home stretch here. We'll start right to left with our clerk. Any from comments?
I do have a couple things. We did have a brief presentation today at 5 from Televic, which is our microphones. They came in to actually interview me this presentation that we currently have. And so I said, well, since you're here, anybody that could come to us see their handheld or portable system, it would be a good idea to be able to, for them to talk to you rather than for me. And they're actually, thanks to Mr. Helen, going to let us demo them just for a trial. You know, I'm not pushing for them one way or other. I just thought it would be interesting, and since they were already going to be here, to have that discussion. The other thing, I had a meeting this morning with our previous state rep, Robert Heelan, and one of my Granville Walker Foundation committee members, Linda Cromding, and he's going to work with contacting Meyer to hopefully get an endowment from Meyer for our Granville Walker Foundation. we're really striving to get our $2 million minimum endowment built up. And so I told him I'd ask all of you today if you could maybe send me an email with who you might be able to contact and reach out to, or give me, basically what we're looking for is if you have a personal connection with somebody from a company or a person in Walker that you can reach out to and say, I'd like to give your information to Linda and Sarah so they can contact you and talk to you. Basically opening up the doors and getting us in to meet and greet with the people that each of you know, so we can move that forward. So he asked me to let you all know that he's willing to help and to ask if any of you have anybody special to reach out to, such as from Bissell or Beth's or Deltaplex or Irwin's. And then Gary, the board would like you to maybe come to one of our next meetings because they knew Mark, and both the mayors were very involved, and so they want to meet you and get you involved as well.
All right.
That's it.
Commissioner Glanville?
Nothing comes to mind. Headed over to CapCon with a number of colleagues tomorrow, so looking forward to that.
Thank you. Commissioner Gruters?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Howland?
I am good as well, and I wish everybody that is going to the Capitol Conference to learn a lot. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner DeShane?
Nothing?
Commissioner Kent?
Just that the microphones, the system, the mobile, it's something that to be looked at and thought, there's a lot of different uses for it, and it's technology coming at us. So, but other than that, we're good. Thank you.
Commissioner Howland? Do you have anything to add on to that?
I was just going to add that the presentation, I wish everybody could have been there to see it. These guys are very willing and open to let us use them so that we can see if there is a need either now or maybe in the future. But they're very impressive. I like them. I think we could use them for a lot of our events. But that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh? Mr. Schmozel? All right, welcome back. Light week this week, so nothing of significance. Some business meetings, just from a mayor's position, and getting kind of having the coffee and giving them updates on things, and then also met with a government affairs representative from the Board of Realtors this afternoon, and my thirst for wanting to have more data and analytics that we can look at things and understand trends a little bit better for decision making. They'll be getting some information to me within about a week, and I'll share that with the group. And a couple of things I asked for today were I think will help us make impacts from a decision making standpoint, budgeting. So I'm on that. I'm on that focus of I want to get more data points that we can help make better decisions. So outside of that, have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next Monday. And I think we are adjourned. We're good.